My first guest today is Amy Hogan. Amy, thanks for coming along.
Thank you, Craig.
So Amy is the Head of Sustainability at Stockland, and Stockland has been involved in the sustainability space for a long time. So I'm sure others who are just getting to this new space and, becoming involved with NABERS, for instance, would be interested in your kind of experience in that area. How's it been?
Look, we're very fortunate. Stockland has been around since 1952. Our vision has not just been about maximising profits and growth for our stakeholders, but it's been about how do we make a meaningful contribution to the communities within which we operate. So sustainability is at the heart of what we do. At our very essence, we're a community creator. We design, develop and operate places where people live, work and play. So it's really important for us to have thriving communities within our asset sort of regions. I think back in 2006 is when we had our very first board corporate responsibility and sustainability committee, which kind of meant that at that point in time, sustainability was being profiled at the very highest levels of the organisation.
And did that make a big difference once you've got that kind of board interacting with it and it's, it becomes a KPI, it becomes something that's been measured?
Yeah.
Did that change things?
Yeah, look, absolutely. I mean, I think once we have board interest and board commitment to delivering on our strategy, which was also established in 2006, we have KPIs, which then go across all organisational employees. We have sustainability action plans and toolkits. And then we have accountability to actually deliver some outcomes. Yeah. So that's really, really important.
So where does NABERS fit in with that? Because, of course, they're assessing, I guess it gives you a number to start with that you can actually interact with.
Yeah, look, I think NABERS, has truly been probably the most effective sustainability program that has shifted how landlords and tenants view building performance and operational efficiency. NABERS is about, an efficiently operating building, and so having a NABERS rating allows you to measure your performance. You can manage that performance over time. You can track how you're performing, and you can set targets and report on those. And so what it means is you end up having a building or a portfolio of assets that are benefiting financially from reduced operating costs. They have smarter management, they have better housekeeping, and they have better outcomes for the occupants overall.
Does that make it easier for you to kind of convince people? It's interesting in the sustainability world. Obviously, there's sometimes a lot of pushback about, that problem's not here, it's not now, it can't see it.
Yep.
That can be the pushback. Does this help in you getting, buy-in from residents or from people who are actually tenants, for instance?
Yeah, look, everything we do in sustainability has a business case. It has to. At Stockland, the sustainability team reports into the CFO. So if, I think that demonstrates a very sophisticated sustainability strategy. So everything we do, whether we can monetize that financial value or we can determine social value that's being created for our customers through health and wellbeing programs or community connection, education initiatives, it's definitely, it has been a challenge in the past, but I think we're now at a point where the industry, with the support of tools like NABERS and Green Star, allow us to demonstrate that financial value through everything that we do.
It's interesting you said there, whether you're able to monetise it. So there'll be instances where you'll be pushing for something where you kind of go, this is not necessarily going to make a profit, but I think there's a value that we can actually, point out in some way, like a social value or something
Absolutely.
like that. So it doesn't have to be a financial benefit.
It doesn't have to. It's helpful to have that.
It's always easier to sell that.
Always is. But, how do you put a value on reputation and brand? And that's also very important. How do you put a value on risk management, on how you manage your climate? There are different ways, and certainly, one of the areas that we focus on at Stockland is about how to start to be able to build value frameworks around being able to quantify and articulate what is the value that we're presenting to the business.
It's interesting you're talking about risk management there. I think I've seen you talk about that before, that with things like climate change, is that starting to be spoken about in a kind of long-term risk management way?
Absolutely, absolutely. So 2011, Stockland established its first climate adaptation strategy. We have conducted over 80 climate and community resilience assessments across all of our asset classes. We've now integrated and developed a group-wide assessment tool with our enterprise risk framework. So managing climate is fundamental to the success of our business, and climate change is up there on our risk register. It's something that we all, particularly at board level, are very, very conscious of, managing appropriately, understanding what are the risks and opportunities created by climate change. And, you know, I think Stockland was the first Australian property company, to disclose our task force climate-related financial disclosures to the Australian Securities Exchange in 2018. So very important.
Yeah, that's great. And I see you've had some big moves actually in terms of reducing greenhouse gases across the organisation, which is great.
Yeah.
It's interesting that when you're coming from a sustainability background there, when you're trying to get buy-in on these issues, how did you find the knowledge of others was like? You know, is part of your job teaching people about this space as well?
Yeah, it's absolutely. It's about, I think, first of all, understanding what are the key drivers of the people that you're working with, that you engage with, and understanding what are the needs of all of those stakeholders. Everyone comes from a different background. I did an environmental science degree a long time ago when it wasn't cool to do environmental science, and people thought I was, you know, a bit of a hippie. My dad thought I was a bit crazy. And at that point in time, you know, I was in the cement and concrete industry and, you know, just constantly banging my head up against a wall. So you have to be persistent. But, you know, over time, you know, we're now at a point in the industry across the country where we don't need to be banging our heads against the wall anymore, and we're not. You know, we actually, in quite a perverse way, you know, the catastrophic bushfires over summer have really just raised climate change mainstream. And so those people who have not been directly impacted by bushfires previously have actually been impacted in their local communities. And so it's actually relevant to them. You know, it's affected people's summer holidays. It's affected their time at the beach, the air pollution, you know, the dust. So, you know, I think now people get it.
Yeah.
It's really important to get to. That's
really interesting. I mean, it is interesting. I've spoken to a lot of sustainability people about that period where you're banging your head against a wall and not getting any win. It's great to hear that we're getting that change now. And I guess, do you find that because you're now getting people going, oh, we realise the scale of this problem, the kind of groundwork you've done in terms of assessing the organisation, getting the KPIs and that, does that make it a lot easier for you to respond and go, oh, yeah, you're worried about it now. Well, we've already been doing this and now we can even do more?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think you need to set a minimum standard across your organisation. I think that's probably a really great piece of advice for someone who's sort of new in this space, and NABERS is a really great way to do that. It's just it's a tool that allows you to manage and benchmark your performance internally and also externally, so an apples to apples comparison. But it's, you know, it's a robust system, it's third-party verified, and it's a common language that everyone really understands.
It's interesting because I've just been working on a show where we've been trying to, I guess, get people to understand their own carbon footprint in their life.
Yeah.
And in a similar way, the first step is going, well, how do you even measure it first? You know, if you can't measure the energy you're using, if you don't know, you can't manage it. And it's amazing how many people do, you know, in their own home would think they don't know what it is that's creating their big power bills or that's, you know, creating their large carbon footprint. So having that measurement is just essential. You can't really change anything until you know what the problem is.
And you have to start somewhere. So, you know, in a previous life when I was involved, I was working at Jones Lang LaSalle on the GPT portfolio. We did the first NABERS portfolio rating, and, you know, at that point in time, you know, everyone was quite nervous around how the assets would perform. But, you know, even if you perform and if you get a lower NABERS star rating, that's okay. You've got to start somewhere.
Well, that's the interesting thing, because I know that when the star ratings were brought in for foods, for instance, most people that thought they weren't going to do well just didn't bother assessing it. And is that hard to get people to go, look, it's fine for our first assessment to not be great. That's the whole point. We want to learn from it.
Absolutely, and it's those assets that have the lower star ratings that can get the biggest gains. So that's where money talks. You know, if you go from a 0-star rating to 3 stars, you are hitting the bottom line of your organisation, and the operating savings that your executive will see just makes it all worthwhile.
It's good to hear that, because sometimes I think in the sustainability space you can have the people who are already kind of at the top are the ones that are trying to do even more, and you go, look, we can get so many more gains and benefits if we go down to those that haven't started the kind of battle, who are really down the bottom. So that's interesting. So I know that NABERS now also has a waste rating as well, and it was when you were first engaging with that, were you surprised by the results you were getting back there?
Yeah, look, NABERS is a great tool in the sense that it has a lot of different areas that it covers, so energy, water, waste, indoor environment. There are a number of the tools, waste in particular, which, is a challenge. And it's a challenge to perform well in.
I know.
Which I'm sure you know.
It's amazing how often you go, I can find the problem, but finding a solution can be really hard.
That's right. And it's often finding the solution can be quite expensive. Particularly, water is a really good example where water is just such a cheap utility. To actually invest in significant changes that will reduce your water footprint can be quite expensive and often require partnerships within industry and beyond with government to actually make those savings. Yeah.
It's interesting, I think, though, how much of a difference it makes organisations like Stockland and others asking those questions is what leads to the change happening. The people going, I've got this problem with this, can't solve it. That's what leads to people going, we need to find a solution to that. So
absolutely. And I think we're at a time now where stakeholders from all backgrounds are really interested in what we do, and whether that's an investor, whether that's a customer or a resident or a government body, they all have their different needs, and they're always asking questions. And so that kind of gives us a really great opportunity to challenge ourselves. I
want to know that. Where do you kind of get, at the moment, in terms of, investors, customers, and government staff, where do you get the most push for kind of sustainability change?
Oh, everywhere.
Everywhere? It's coming from everywhere now.
All different angles, but it really provides us with an opportunity. And, I, in a sustainability role, love it when we get questions from investors, because that profiles the materiality that sustainability has across the organisation. And investors are very interested now in ESG issues, so environmental, social and governance issues. We as an organisation have been responding to investor surveys like DJSI, GRESB and the Carbon Disclosure Project for a number of years now, and have often, since 2011, been recognised as the leading sustainable property company in the world. But it's really important to know that those queries are not going to go away. And in fact, more and more investors will be asking us more information. And we need to have the right systems like NABERS to respond, and how we're actually proactively managing our energy efficiency and our assets.
So do you see, are those kind of questions from investors growing over the last few years?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely, particularly in terms of climate. And TCFD and energy efficiency, and NABERS is the perfect tool to support that conversation.
That's great.
Yeah.
I noticed that you've also, you've invested a lot in energy efficiency. You've also seemed to have recently invested a lot in solar. I think you went from 3 gigawatt hours to 12 gigawatt hours in a year, or nearly 13.
I think we've got 18 megawatts now across retail and logistics, and we've invested about 32 million. Yeah. So the business case is there. Yeah. And a lot of our peers are doing the same thing now too, which is really fantastic. So our challenge for us is extending that sort of solar proposition from retail to our residential business and to our retirement living business, where our customers are really keen to understand how they can reduce their energy bills.
Well, this is interesting, because NABERS is moving into the kind of retirement area. Do you think, are there differences that are substantial there, when you move into that retirement area?
Retirement living is a fascinating asset class. It is incredibly different to office and to retail. There are very different drivers, and they have incredibly unique stakeholders, the residents that live in the village, who have very different drivers around what they think sustainability is. So when we run programs across our portfolio and RL, we're very conscious of using the correct language. And we know that for residents, I often think that residents in villages are probably like our original greenies. They were raised at a time where, they hated wasting things. They had to be very conscious of managing their resources. And now cost of living is incredibly important to them. So if we can have a tool like NABERS in retirement living that helps us actually manage the energy consumption and efficiency of the built form, that'll hit the residents' hip pocket in a good way.
It's interesting that I definitely found doing War on Waste that the older generation had this real hatred of waste that came from the way they were brought up, whereas in some ways you'd have with the younger generation it had been in a more throwaway society.
It's consumerism.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So in that front, you're obviously going to get a lot of buy-in at retirement living in that front, and on the cost front. Are you kind of also trying to, I guess, educate on the climate front as well when it comes to that? Or do you just go, let's use these other, let's use the kind of let's use the arguments they understand to start?
Yeah, look, I think it doesn't matter who we talk to. We have to have simple messaging, and we have to have messaging sort of tailored to their individual needs and their wants. I think for residents, we have conducted a lot of climate resilience assessments at villages. And in fact, we had a number of villages that were evacuated and smoke impacted in the bushfires over summer. So, we also have residents who are also really interested in, microgrids and renewable energy. And, from our perspective, it's about harnessing those champions in the village to really, start environmental committees and conversations, and we can run sessions and, move forward. But there's huge opportunities in RL.
That's great. Now, in terms of you've obviously been in this space for a long time, in terms of your great successes, what are you most proud of?
I'm proud of a lot of things. I do love my job. It can be quite stressful at times, but I'm very proud and honoured to be leading the sustainability sort of strategy for the business. I feel like I've got a lot of responsibility on my shoulders, but there's so many things that we've achieved, over the past few years around climate and carbon and energy. We've done a lot of work in social valuation, but it's really about the team of people that we have at Stockland, and it's about the culture. We have a purpose, and that purpose is we believe there's a better way to live. And so that drives what we do. So it's all about the people, and the sustainability team is really important at Stockland. We set strategy, we guide and facilitate, but it's about everyone across the organisation having accountability, and they're an incredibly passionate bunch of people. So that's really probably what I'm proud of most.
Just finally, you talked about, I guess, a time, probably before your current job, where you have at times had a lot of pushback against you.
Yep.
What would you say to people who might be in an organisation that's really just starting out and they're getting that pushback? How do they keep it up? How do they keep up the energy? How do they get that change?
My advice would be to let people know that they have friends. The industry is incredibly sophisticated now in this space. We have a lot of experience, and we're incredibly collaborative. We're quite a competitive bunch of people, but we do like to work together to achieve a greater good. And so if anyone's struggling, if they needed guidance, they want a sounding board, they need someone's shoulder to cry on, or someone to help celebrate their successes, all they have to do is pick up a phone, and there will be lots of people, including myself, who will be more than happy to provide some advice.
Yeah, go. Well, we'll send Amy's phone number to everyone. Thank you so much, Amy. Thank you for joining us. And next up, we have Steve Ford from GPT.